The night hung still over the desert plains, painted in copper and flame by a dying sun. A single campfire crackled between two souls who never should have met. The young woman sat close to the light, clutching the edges of a rough wool blanket around her shoulders. Her face was streaked with dust and dried tears, her blue dress torn at the hem from running through the canyon. The world around her smelled of smoke, sagebrush, and something ancient, something that belonged to him. Across from her, the Apache crouched silently. His skin glowed bronze beneath the firelight, muscles cut from a life of wind, war, and wilderness. His long black hair caught the fire's reflection like silk dipped in blood. Around his neck hung tribal jewelry bones, turquoise, and small teeth that told stories older than any written word. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched her, eyes steady and unreadable, like the desert itself, merciless and eternal. She wanted to look away, but something in those eyes wouldn't let her. They were not cruel, not savage, as she'd been taught to believe. They carried a weight, a sadness maybe, that unsettled her even more than fear. It was as if he knew her, every thought, every secret, every lie she'd ever told to survive. The wind shifted. Coyotes howled somewhere beyond the rocks. The night pressed closer. He finally spoke, his voice low, deep and calm. "You should not have come this far from your people." She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. "I didn't mean to. Just ... I ran." They were going to, she stopped herself, biting down on the words as if they burned. He waited, unmoving, his gaze never leaving her. "They were going to trade me," she said at last, her voice barely more than a whisper. "For cattle, for safety, for whatever they thought I was worth." Her throat tightened. "I don't even know if my family's alive now." For a long moment, the Apache said nothing. Then, in the quiet rhythm of the fire, he reached for the clay pot resting on a flat stone. Steam rose as he poured water into a wooden cup and set it before her. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his for an instant. His skin was warm, calloused, but steady like a man who feared nothing in this world. "Drink," he said. She obeyed. The water was bitter with smoke, but tasted of life. He rose slowly, his shadow stretching long across the dirt, and added wood to the fire. Sparks shot upward into the desert night like fleeting souls. She studied him from behind the cup, noticing the scars that ran along his back and shoulders, marks of battles fought not just with men, but with time itself. "What do they call you?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked down at her. "They call me nothing that matters," he said. "You may call me what you wish. I don't even know your name." "You will not need it," he said, and turned toward the darkness beyond the fire. "You only need to live till morning." Her pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He scanned the horizon like a hawk, every muscle ready. The night seemed to tighten around them, as if the desert itself was listening. Then, faint at first, came the echo of horses, many horses. Her eyes widened. "They're coming," she whispered. He nodded. "They will not stop until they find you." "Who? The men who?" He cut her off with a sharp glance. "Your people, my people. It makes no difference now." The ground trembled under distant hooves. He stepped toward her and knelt close, his face lit by the fire's glow. "If you wish to live," he said softly, "you must trust me." Her breath caught. "Why would you help me?" His hand came up, not in anger, but in warning. "Because I remember what mercy feels like," he said. "I will not let them take it from me again." She didn't understand what he meant, but the way he said it made her chest ache. He reached for a leather strap beside the fire and tied his long hair back. "We leave before the moon rises. If they see our trail, we're both dead." She stared at him, heart pounding. "You're taking me with you?" His gaze held hers. "You cannot stay. They would find you by dawn, and they would not show mercy." The fear inside her shifted, became something heavier, something mixed with trust she didn't want to feel. He moved behind her, cutting loose the rope that bound her wrists. She winced as the blood returned to her fingers. "Now trust me," he whispered, his voice low, almost tender. "And the rest you will understand soon." The way he said it made the night stand still. The hooves were closer to thunder over sand and stone. The Apache pulled her up by the arm, leading her toward the canyon's shadowed edge. His touch was firm but not cruel. The fire behind them hissed and spat as if trying to call them back. She stumbled, but he caught her easily, guiding her through the darkness. The smell of pine sap and dust filled her lungs. She could hear her own heart beat louder than the horses behind them. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To a place they won't dare to follow," he said. His hand never let go of hers as they slipped between the rocks and into a narrow ravine. The moon rose higher, pale and watchful, lighting their path in silver. She could see now the faint tattoos on his arm marks shaped like arrows and flames, symbols of things she could not read but somehow felt. Every step took them deeper into the wild, away from everything she'd ever known. The fear that once drove her began to change, melting into something she couldn't name. At one point, when they stopped to catch breath, he turned to her. "You are not like them," he said. "You don't carry hate in your eyes." "I don't carry anything anymore," she said quietly. "You took it all." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Maybe not all." Thunder cracked in the distance, not from the sky but from rifles. He moved instantly, pulling her down into the sand. Bullets whistled past the rocks. She gasped, trembling. He pressed a finger to her lips. "Stay down," he whispered. His eyes caught hers, fierce and burning. "You do not move unless I tell you." In that heartbeat of silence, she realized something: he wasn't protecting her for his own gain. He was fighting for her as if she were already part of his fate. The gunfire faded as quickly as it came. He scanned the horizon, muscles taut, then rose again. "They are close," he said. "But we can reach the canyon's edge before dawn if you keep up." She nodded, breath shaking. "Try." He looked back at her, almost smiling. "You will do more than try." They started moving again, the desert stretching endlessly before them. The moon painted the land in ghostlight, and for the first time, she felt the strange comfort of his presence beside her, this man she had been taught to fear. Somewhere deep inside, something was changing. By the time the first light of dawn began to brush the horizon, the girl could barely walk. Her feet were torn, her throat dry. The Apache stopped, kneeling beside a stream hidden beneath tall reeds. He cupped water in his hands and offered it to her. She drank, eyes never leaving his face. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Before the sun rises," he whispered, "you must choose. Go back to the world that betrayed you, or follow me into one that may never forgive you." Her lips parted, but no words came. The canyon wind howled around them, carrying the scent of smoke, gunpowder, and something wild, something new. He stood tall, silhouetted against the faint light of dawn, a living echo of everything her world feared and everything her heart suddenly yearned to trust. And for the first time since her escape, she felt it deep in her chest that everything was about to change. The morning came quietly, bleeding light over the jagged edges of the canyon. The air was cool, filled with the sound of running water and the call of a distant hawk. The young woman sat near the stream, her dress damp at the hem, trying to wash the dirt from her arms. A reflection trembled in the water, making her look like a stranger. The night before still felt like a dream she hadn't woken from the gunfire. The running, the Apache who now stood a few yards away sharpening a knife on a flat stone. He hadn't said a word since dawn. The only sound came from the scrape of metal against rock. She watched him, the way his shoulders moved, the quiet strength in every motion. There was something about him that felt ancient, like he belonged to the land itself. She wanted to ask who he really was, where he was taking her, but every time she opened her mouth, the words fell away. When the silence grew too heavy, she finally spoke. "You didn't tell me why you saved me." He didn't look up. "You needed saving." "That's not what I asked." He paused, then set the knife aside. The light caught the small scars on his chest, like faint white trails left by past battles.
"Help."
"Because once," he said slowly, "someone did the same for me." She frowned. "Who?" He turned his head toward the rising sun. "A white man, a long time ago. Before your people burned my village." Her breath caught. "I didn't. I know," he said, voice calm but cold. "You didn't, but they did." The weight of his words hung between them. The young woman lowered her eyes, guilt twisting in her chest even though she didn't understand why. She wasn't part of that war. She was just a girl who had run away from her own kind because they'd sold her life like a mule at auction. Yet sitting there before him, she couldn't shake the feeling that somehow she was tied to all of it: the broken promises, the fear, the blood on both sides. He stood and tied the knife back to his belt. We move before the sun climbs higher. The heat will kill you faster than bullets. She rose, brushing off her skirt. Where are we going? North, he said, to the high country. There's water and shelter there. You'll be safe. Safe, she repeated softly. Is anyone safe out here? His eyes met hers, dark and still. Not for long. They began walking, leaving the canyon behind. The land opened wide red sand, low brush, and hills that shimmered in the distance like a mirage. She tried to keep up, her feet sore and blistered, her lungs burning in the dry air. He carried no map, no compass, yet he moved as if the earth itself guided him. Every so often, he would glance back to make sure she was still close. Why did your people attack the town? She asked after a long while, his jaw tightened. Not my people, the young ones. They don't remember what peace looked like. They only know what was taken from them. And what was taken? He looked over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. Everything. They kept walking. Sun rose higher, burning against their backs. By midday, her dress was soaked in sweat and dust. He led her to a shaded ridge where a trickle of water ran through the rocks. She knelt and drank greedily. He watched in silence before filling a small leather pouch from the stream. She caught him studying her face, and for a moment neither looked away. There was something almost tender in his gaze, something she didn't expect to find there. It made her heart stumble in her chest. You're not like the others, she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. You mean I don't wear boots and call myself civilized? No, she said, shaking her head. I mean you don't hate me. His eyes softened for a moment. Hate takes too much life. I've seen what it turns men into. Then what do you feel toward me? She asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. He didn't reply. He stood, slinging his satchel across his shoulder. We need to keep moving. She followed him through the rocks, her mind tangled with questions. She wanted to know what had happened to him, what ghosts he carried that made him so quiet. But the more she watched him, the more she realized some stories were not told with words. They were carved into the body, hidden behind the eyes, spoken only in silence. As the day dragged on, they crossed into a dry valley. The wind carried dust that stung her eyes and filled her mouth with grit. He handed her a strip of cloth. Cover your face, he said. The desert doesn't forgive weakness. She did as he said, but her legs trembled with every step. He slowed his pace slightly, never admitting it was for her sake. When they reached a cluster of dead mesquite trees, he finally stopped. We rest here, he said. She sank to the ground, exhausted. Do you ever stop moving? Not when men are hunting me. She froze. You mean us? He nodded. They'll find the trail by now. Maybe by nightfall. A shiver ran down her spine. Then why are we resting? 'Cause if you collapse, neither of us will make it, he said plainly. She watched him gather dry branches and strike a small fire. The flames flickered weakly against the afternoon wind. He took a piece of jerky from his pouch and handed it to her. What about you? She asked. He shook his head. I'll eat when the dark comes. She took a small bite. The meat was tough, salty, but it filled her empty stomach. She studied him again, the way his eyes never rested, always scanning the horizon, always ready for danger. You don't trust anyone, do you? She said softly. He looked at her then, and for a moment she thought he might smile. Trust is a luxury for men who sleep in towns, he said. Out here, trust gets you killed. She stared into the fire. Then why did you tell me to trust you? He was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, because if you don't, you'll die before you learn why I'm risking my life to keep you alive. Her heart thudded. And why are you? He didn't answer. The wind howled through the valley, carrying the faint echo of something voices, maybe, or just her imagination. He stood, every sense alert. They're closer, he said. Who? He listened for a moment longer, then turned toward her. White riders, maybe soldiers, maybe worse. Fear crawled up her throat. If they find us, they won't, he said sharply. Not if you listen to me. She rose, clutching her blanket, trembling. Where can we go? There's nothing out here. There's always something, he said. Even in the desert, the land hides those it wishes to keep. They doused the fire and moved again, climbing into a narrow gorge, where the rocks rose high, like cathedral walls. The sound of boots and hooves drifted faintly behind them now, carried on the wind. She moved fast, guiding her through crevices, barely wide enough for one person. The world around them narrowed to stone and shadow. Her hands bled from gripping sharp rock. Her knees scraped, but she said nothing. She couldn't afford to. Finally, they reached a hollow behind a boulder, half hidden by vines. He motioned for her to crawl inside. "Stay quiet," he whispered. No sound. They crouched together in the dark. She could feel his breath near her ear, hear the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the voices came closer, men shouting orders, the clang of metal, the sound of spurs. She pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from gasping. One rider stopped nearby. She could see his shadow through the cracks of stone. "Tracks lead this way," a voice called. Another answered, "If the girl's alive, she won't be for long." The Apache's hand found hers in the darkness. His grip was strong, reassuring. She looked at him, saw the calm in his eyes even as death stood just feet away. Minutes passed like hours, then the sound began to fade. The riders moved on, their voices swallowed by the wind. She finally exhaled, her whole body trembling. He let go of her hand but didn't move away. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "They don't give up what they think belongs to them. And what do they think I am?" she whispered. He looked at her, his face unreadable in the dim light. "A prize," he said. "But they don't know yet that you're something far more dangerous than that." Her chest tightened. "Dangerous me?" Nodded slowly. "You carry something they want, and you don't even know it." Before she could ask what he meant, he turned toward the narrow opening and listened again. The last echo of hoofbeats faded into silence. She touched his arm. "What are you not telling me?" His gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. "That your coming here was no accident," he said. "That before this is over, you'll have to choose which side of the fire you stand on." She felt the weight of his words sink deep, even as the shadows around them began to grow. The wind outside carried the faint smell of smoke again, from their fire but from somewhere far off, where the world was still burning. And she knew then that whatever lay ahead was only beginning. The night came again before they had gone far. The desert turned cold, and the moon hung like a pale wound above the cliffs. They stopped by a dry creek bed where the Apache began to make a small fire from brushwood. The young woman sat a short distance away, pulling her shawl close around her shoulders. Every shadow looked like it might move. Every sound felt like it carried danger. She could still hear the echo of those riders' voices in her head. He placed a few stones in a circle and struck a spark. When the flame caught, his face lit up in the dim glow. She noticed the tiredness behind his steady expression, the faint tremor in his hands. He had been running too, though he never admitted fear. Looked up at her and said, "We rest only till dawn." She nodded. "Do you think they'll find us again?" He looked toward the horizon where the stars met the earth. "They always find what they think they own. The question is, how far they're willing to go for it." Something in his voice chilled her. She remembered how he had said she carried something they wanted, but he never explained what it was. The thought had grown inside her all day like a storm waiting to break. "What did you mean before?" she asked softly. "About me carrying something?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a piece of flint and carved a small mark into one of the stones beside the fire, a symbol shaped like a sun, surrounded by arrows. "This mark," he said finally, "was drawn on the canyon walls long before your people came here. My father said it meant destiny. My mother said it meant warning. I think it means both." Her brows knit together. "And what does that have to do with me?" Lifted his eyes to hers. "The night I found you, I saw that same mark burned into the wood near where you fell. You were meant to be there." She shook her head. "That's not possible. I was running for my life." Nothing about that was meant. He leaned closer, his tone calm, but certain. "Maybe not by your choice. But the land has its own way of pulling people where it wants them." She looked at the ground, her mind spinning. "I don't believe in fate." He gave a quiet smile. "You will." The silence stretched between them, filled by the soft crackle of fire and the faraway cry of a wolf. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, but exhaustion weighed heavy on her. When she finally lay down beside the warmth, he stayed awake, sitting cross-legged, his knife resting on his knee. His eyes never left the darkness beyond the fire. By morning, the wind had changed. The smell of smoke carried from the east. He stood quickly and scanned the ridgeline. The woman woke at the sound of his movement. "What is it?" she asked. "Smoke," he said, "from the valley. That means soldiers. They've burned something." Her stomach turned. "Do you think they're looking for me?" He gave a slow nod. "You and more. There's something happening out here. It's something bigger than a runaway girl." They packed quickly and started moving again through the scrub and rock. The land grew harsher. The further north they went, dry ravines, twisted cedar, and canyons so deep the sun barely reached the bottom. As they climbed a narrow trail, she began to hear the sound of rushing water. Soon they stood before a small waterfall hidden between cliffs, a curtain of silver spilling into a dark pool below. "This place," he said, "was once sacred. The women of my people would come here to pray for the strength of their children." She stepped closer to the water, mesmerized by its calmness. "Why bring me here?" He looked down at her. "Because I think you need strength too," as she knelt to touch the pool. Something caught her Aja-carved figure in the stone wall behind the falls, a woman holding a flame in her hands. The same sun and arrow mark glowed faintly above her head. "That symbol again," she whispered. He nodded. The old one said it marked the bridge between two worlds, the one of peace and the one of blood. "Maybe that's what we're standing in now." Before she could answer, a sound echoed from above voices, then the clatter of hooves. He grabbed her arm and pulled her into the shadow of the falls. The spray drenched them both as they hid behind the veil of water. Two riders appeared on the ridge above, rifles slung across their shoulders. They spoke in low voices she couldn't understand. She could see the glint of metal, the flash of badges. "Soldiers," she whispered. "Bounty men. Bounty men, worse than soldiers." They watched as the riders dismounted and began scanning the ground. One of them knelt, touching the dirt where their footprints had been. "We have to go," she whispered. "Not yet," he said. "We move now, they'll see us." Her pulse hammered as the men drew closer to the edge of the cliff. For a terrifying moment, she thought one might look down and see the faint ripple of the falls revealing their hiding place. But a shout came from somewhere beyond the ridge, and the riders turned, cursing, before remounting and riding off. When they were gone, she finally exhaled. "How long can we keep running like this?" He turned toward her, water dripping from his hair. "As long as we must. But there's something you need to understand. Those men aren't just hunting you. They're hunting what you know." She blinked. "What I know?" "I don't know anything, maybe not yet," he said quietly. "But they think you do. And that's enough to get you killed." They stayed hidden until the sun began to fall, then started north again, following the stream through a narrow gorge. She couldn't stop thinking about his words. What could she possibly know that mattered to anyone? Then fragments of memory began to surface, voices from the night she ran, her father's trembling hands, a sealed letter given to one of the ranchers before she escaped. She remembered her father saying something about a shipment and the war. The Apache noticed her silence. "What are you remembering?" "Maybe nothing," she said. "But my father, before I ran, he said something about a secret deal with the army. Something hidden I didn't understand." He slowed his pace, his eyes sharp. "The army?" "Yes, he said it could end everything if the wrong people found out." He looked ahead toward the darkening sky. "Then they'll keep coming until they're sure you're dead." The words struck like a cold wind. She stopped walking. "You mean they'll never stop?" He turned to face her. "No, because you are the one thing they can't control." Thunder rolled far off in the distance, echoing through the canyon. The first drops of rain began to fall. They found shelter beneath a ledge, huddled close as the storm broke overhead. The scent of wet earth filled the air. She turned to him. "You could leave me. You don't owe me anything." He looked at her, his voice low and certain. "Maybe not. But I owe something to what's right. And maybe saving you is the only right thing left for me to do." For a long while, they sat in silence, listening to the storm. Lightning flashed across the valley, revealing for an instant the endless stretch of land below. It was beautiful and cruel all at once. When the rain finally slowed, the Apache reached into his pouch and took out a small bundle wrapped in leather. He placed it in her hands. Inside was a silver pendant, shaped like the same Sanandaro mark, carved into the canyon wall. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "She wore it the day she died. I found it near the river, where the soldiers left her. She used to say it would find its way back to the person meant to carry it next." She stared at it, the metal cold against her skin. "Why give it to me?" "Because it found you," he said simply. Before she could answer, another sound broke the quiet, faint but unmistakable, the distant crack of a rifle. He moved instantly, pulling her down. "They've tracked us again." "How?" she gasped. "Rainhide's scent, not footprints." He drew his knife and scanned the darkness. "Stay low and do as I say." The sound of hooves grew closer, echoing through the wet earth. Shadows moved along the ridge, pushed her toward a narrow crevice between the rocks. "Go. What about you?" He gave a hard smile. "I'll make sure they don't follow." She froze, fear burning in her throat. "You'll get killed." He looked back at her, eyes steady. "Then at least it won't be for nothing." Before she could argue, he was gone, slipping into the storm, like part of the earth itself. The rain began to fall harder again, masking his footsteps. She crouched inside the crevice, clutching the pendant, praying silently, though she didn't know to whom. Gunfire echoed through the canyon, followed by shouts and the clash of steel. She covered her ears, her heart pounding. Then, through the noise, she heard it, a cry that didn't belong to a man dying, but to one fighting for everything he had left. The rain washed the sound away, leaving only silence. She waited, her breath shaking, unsure if he was alive or dead. The pendant glowed faintly in her hand under the flash of lightning. She didn't understand why, but somehow she felt it wasn't over. Somewhere out there, beyond the rain and gunfire, the truth waited like a buried fire. And she knew when it rose, it would change everything. The rain stopped by midnight, leaving the world soaked and trembling. The young woman crouched in the hollow of the rocks, gripping the silver pendant so tight it cut into her palm. The silence that followed the gunfire was worse than the sound itself. It was the kind of silence that waited for something. Every few minutes, she thought she heard footsteps, but it was only water dripping from the ledge above. Her breath came in short gasps. She didn't know if he was alive, but the thought of leaving him out there alone was tearing her apart. When the first thin light of dawn crept across the canyon, she finally moved. The rain had washed most of the blood from the ground, but she could still see signs of struggle boot prints, broken reeds, a piece of torn fabric. She followed the trail, heart pounding. Then she saw him. He was slumped against a rock, his shoulder bleeding where a bullet had grazed him, his knife still clutched in his hand. She ran to him, kneeling beside him. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice shaking. He opened his eyes slowly. "I told you. I would make sure they didn't follow." "You're hurt," she said, tearing a strip from her dress and pressing it to his wound. He winced but didn't push her away. "It's nothing. They'll be back soon. We need to move." "No," she said, her voice firmer than before. "You've saved me more times than I can count. Let me save you now." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing something he hadn't before. "You think you can save me from this world?" "Maybe not the world," she said quietly, "but I can stop it from taking you tonight." For a moment, neither spoke. The firelight of dawn touched his face, softening the lines of anger and pain. She bound his shoulder as best she could. When she finished, he nodded once. "We go north," he said again. "There's a place where the land swallows the sun. If we reach it, we'll have a chance." She helped him stand, and they moved through the canyon, his arm over her shoulder for support. The world around them glowed gold and red under the rising sun, but the beauty only deepened the tension in the air. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried, and the echo bounced across the rocks like a warning. By midday, they reached a high plateau covered in dry grass. From there, they could see the valley stretched out for miles. Smoke curled from distant fires, marking where the riders were burning through villages and camps. The woman shivered. "Any towns have they destroyed?" "Too many," he said. "They want the land empty, quiet, waiting for their fences and flags." "Is that what this is all about?" she asked. The land, he gave a hollow laugh. "Everything is about the land, even you." She frowned. "Me," he turned toward her, eyes dark. "The army's secret, the one your father carried, it's buried beneath this land. They call it a weapon. My people call it a curse." Her breath caught. "You mean the thing he said could end everything?" "Yes," he said. a weapon made to destroy without fire or steel. Something they found in the mountains, a poison in the earth that kills whatever breathes near it. They want to dig it up, use it to drive my people away. She stared at him, horrified. They think I know where it is. Nodded. Your father helped them find the first map, but he changed his mind. Hid the second one before they could use it. And you think he told me? She asked. Think he told someone who loved him enough to run, he said. Her chest tightened. She remembered her father's trembling hands, the way he'd pressed that sealed letter into her pocket before she fled. She had lost it in the chaos of her escape, somewhere between the canyon and the river. There's a letter, she whispered. He gave it to me that night. His expression hardened. Where is it? I don't know. I lost it. He closed his eyes briefly. Then they'll tear the land apart until they find it. The wind picked up, bending the grass. In the distance, the glint of sunlight flashed off metal binoculars. Rifles, maybe both. They're tracking us, she said. He followed her gaze and cursed under his breath. We need cover. They slipped into the shadow of a ridge, moving fast despite his wound. The ground grew steeper, the rocks sharper. He stumbled once, and she caught him before he fell. You should rest, she said. Not yet, he replied. If they catch us here, it ends. They reached a narrow ledge overlooking the valley. Below them, a group of riders was moving in single file through the grass, their uniforms dirty and their rifles ready. They stopped near a broken tree and began spreading out. The Apache studied them carefully. They're splitting up. Half will circle the ridge. Others will cut us off. What do we do? She asked. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in hide. Inside were 2 bullets and a strip of dried tobacco. He looked at her, his eyes unreadable. If they catch us, they'll make you tell them where the map is. You must not. She shook her head, terrified. Don't say that. He took her hand, pressing the silver pendant into her palm. If they kill me, this goes to the elders in the northern camp. Promise me. I can't promise that, she said, voice trembling. Not if it means losing you. He looked away, jaw tight. Sometimes saving one person means losing another. She stared at him, tears stinging her eyes. Then let me fight too. He almost smiled. You already are. The sound of gunfire cut through the air. Bullets struck the rocks near their feet. He pulled her down, rolling behind a boulder. Dust exploded around them. They found us, she cried. He loaded his rifle, teeth clenched. Stay down. The riders were closing in from both sides. She could see their faces, Nagrem determined, eyes cold as the steel in their hands. No. The Apache fired once, hitting a rider cleanly off his horse. Another shot rang out, grazing the rock near her head. He moved like lightning, steady even as the wound in his shoulder bled through the bandage. We can't hold them here, she shouted. He turned to her, breathing hard. Then we make them chase us where they don't belong. Before she could ask what he meant, he pulled her to her feet and ran toward the edge of the ridge. Below them yawned a deep ravine filled with thorn bushes and jagged stone. I can't go down there, she said. He gripped her hand. It's the only way. Another volley of shots cracked behind them. He jumped first, sliding down the slope in a shower of dust and rock. She followed, tumbling hard but landing beside him. Pain shot through her legs, but she forced herself up. The riders tried to follow, but their horses balked at the drop. The Apache took her hand and led her through the narrow ravine. The air grew damp and cold. Strange carvings covered the walls, circles, arrows, and sunbursts. This place, she whispered. What is it? He didn't answer right away. The heart of the land, he said finally. My people believe it's where the world began and where it will end. They kept moving until they reached a cave entrance hidden by hanging vines. Inside, the air smelled of stone and smoke. The walls shimmered faintly, with symbols drawn in ash. He lit a small torch from his pack. The light revealed more carvings, figures of men and beasts, rivers of fire, the same sun and arrow symbol again and again. Her voice trembled. Is this where the weapon is buried? He nodded. Yes, the poison in the earth. They'll come for it soon, but if they find it, they'll destroy everything, she said. That's why we must stop them, he said. But it won't be with bullets. He placed the torch in her hand. If I don't come back, you light this fire again when the sun touches the canyon mouth. That's the signal. She looked at him, her eyes full of fear. "Where are you going?" "To draw them away," he said quietly. "To give you time." "No," she said, grabbing his arm. "You'll die out there." He touched her cheek gently. "Maybe, but if you live, then this land has a future." Outside, the echo of voices grew louder. Horses neighed, boots struck stone. Gave her one last look, then slipped into the shadows beyond the cave mouth. She stood alone, the torch flickering in her hand, the air trembling with approaching thunder. For the first time, she understood what he meant when he said everything was about to change. The sound of gunfire erupted again outside, closer now, sharper. She pressed herself against the cave wall, the pendant burning warm against her chest. And in that moment, surrounded by the symbols of an ancient world and the war of a new one, she knew the storm was coming, one that would decide not only their fate, but the fate of the land itself. The cave walls trembled with the echo of gunfire. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the air filled with smoke and the scent of iron. The young woman stood near the fire, clutching the torch the Apache had left her. The light flickered against her face, casting her shadow high on the stone, like a spirit torn between two worlds. She could hear voices outside, men shouting orders, horses whinnying, and the sharp crack of rifles. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like the whole mountain could hear it. Then came a different sound, closer, his voice. She couldn't make out the words, but she knew it was him. The Apache was still fighting. She ran to the cave's mouth and peered through the hanging vines. In the half-light of dawn, she saw him darting between rocks, moving with the grace of a predator, even through pain. A shot rang out, striking the stone inches from his head. He didn't flinch. He raised his rifle and fired once. One of the riders fell. Another turned his horse, shouting for the others to surround him. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Every instinct told her to stay hidden, but another voice inside her, something fierce and wild, refused to let her watch him die alone. She grabbed the silver pendant hanging from her neck and whispered, "Guide me." Then she stepped out into the morning light. The wind whipped through the canyon. She could see them now, 5 riders left, their coats streaked with mud, their eyes cold with determination. They didn't see her at first. The Apache had drawn their focus entirely, standing tall despite his bleeding shoulder. His rifle jammed and he tossed it aside, pulling his knife from his belt. When one of the men charged, she shouted, "Stop!" Her voice cracked but carried through the canyon like thunder. The riders turned. The Apache saw her and shook his head, shouting something she couldn't hear. One of the riders recognized her. "That's the girl." "She's the one," he yelled. They began to move toward her. Fear clawed up her throat, but she didn't back away. She stood her ground, holding the torch high. "You don't know what you're doing," she cried. "If you dig up what's under this land, you'll kill us all." The lead rider sneered. "You don't know what you're talking about, girl. You were just a bargaining chip. My father wasn't part of your plan," she said. "He hid the truth from you because he saw what you'd become." The man laughed, but it was a cruel sound. "Then you'll tell us where he hid it, or I'll bury you right here." The Apache moved like lightning. He came from the side, slamming into the man and knocking him from his horse. The others fired, bullets ripping through the air. The woman ducked behind a rock, clutching the pendant as the torch fell from her hand. The flame flickered out, smoke curling into the morning light. The Apache fought like a storm, silent, fast, unrelenting. 2 men went down, but one caught him across the ribs with a bayonet. He staggered, gripping the wound, but didn't fall. Another bullet hit the rock near his head, sending shards of stone flying. The woman crawled toward him, her hands trembling. She found the torch and struck it against the ground, sparks catching again. The light flared and she raised it high. "Stop," she cried. The last 2 riders hesitated. The Apache stood beside her now, blood on his chest, knife still in hand. "Go back," he said to them, his voice low and steady. "Leave this land to the dead." The men exchanged a glance. One spat on the ground. "You think you can stop what's coming? The army will be here by sundown. They'll burn every inch of this place." "Then let them burn," he said. "But not with this poison in their hands." The man aimed his rifle. "You're too late for that." Before he could fire, the young woman threw the torch into the pool of oil that had seeped from the rocks. Flames shot up instantly, roaring to life. The heat was blinding. The riders turned their horses and fled. The fire spread across the ground, racing toward the entrance of the cave. The Apache caught her by the arm. "We have to move." They ran together down the narrow path leading away from the canyon, The fire followed them, crawling up the walls like a living thing. The smoke was thick, and she could barely breathe. Her legs burned, her chest ached, but she kept moving. The pendant around her neck grew hotter with every step until it felt like it was burning her skin. They reached a ridge overlooking the desert. Behind them, the cave glowed orange and red, the flames climbing into the sky. The Apache fell to one knee, clutching his side. She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "You can't die now," she said. "It's over. We did it." He looked at her, his breathing shallow. "No," he whispered. "It's just beginning." She shook her head. "No. The map's gone. They can't use it." He reached for the pendant around her neck. "The land remembers," he said. "You carry that now." She grabbed his hand, holding it tight. "You're coming with me. We'll find help." He smiled faintly. "There is no help for men like me, but for you. There's still a path." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain again. He looked toward the horizon where the sun was breaking through the smoke. "Do you see that?" he asked softly. "That's what we fight for. Not land, not revenge. It's just the right to see another sunrise." She could barely speak through her tears. "You'll see it again," she said. He closed his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. "Then let it be enough." She held him until the wind grew cold and the sound of the fire faded behind them. The desert stretched wide and silent. The storm clouds broke, and a gentle rain began to fall, hissing against the cooling ashes. She stayed there for a long time, her hand resting on his chest, until it no longer rose. When she finally stood, the world felt heavier, but also clearer. She looked down at the pendant, still warm against her skin, and slipped it into her pocket. Then she turned toward the north, where the high country waited. She walked for days, following the stars at night and the hawks by day. Once, she came across the ruins of a burned-out village. Among the ashes, she found children's footprints and a few surviving elders who took her in. They told her stories of the Apache who had protected them from the army's wrath, a man who fought not for vengeance, but for balance. In time, they began to speak of her tooth, the woman who carried the mark of the sun and the arrow. The one who saved the sacred ground by fire. She never told them her name. She said it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the land was breathing again, that the river had returned to the canyon, and that the world had one more chance to start over. Years passed, the army never came back to that place. The desert grew wild again, and the stories of what happened became legend. Travelers who passed through swore they saw a figure standing on the ridge at sunset, a tall man with long black hair, watching the horizon, waiting for someone. Sometimes when the wind blew just right, the woman would stop and listen. In the rustle of the grass and the cry of the hawks, she could still hear him whispering those same words that had changed everything. "Trust me." And she would close her eyes, feel the sun warm her face, and whisper back, "I do." The land held their story after that. The fire, the loss, the love that defied all the rules of the old world. And somewhere between the river and the stars, their spirits walked together, keeping watch over the desert they had saved, reminding whoever listened that courage, once born, never dies. The woman never returned to the towns. She made her home among the canyons, where the sound of the wind carried both sorrow and peace. Sometimes at dawn, she lit a small fire by the water and placed the silver pendant beside it, just for a moment, to let the flame catch its reflection. Then she would whisper a prayer in his language, one she had learned in her years among his people. It meant gratitude. And as the smoke rose into the light of another day, the desert answered back with silence, soft, endless, alive.